Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Professor.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Professor.
Good afternoon. So only 8 people now. So we'll wait for another 5-6 minutes. Okay, good afternoon. Before we start today's session, just want to know from some of you, how was the journey in trimester 1? We are almost completing the journey probably this month end.
It was good, Professor. A lot of learning, and it gave a new dimension.
Hmm.
Maybe approach it, or, because in a workplace, we used to just HRM used to be just on a transactional basis, but with the learning, we would be able to um, understand the functions and how they operate and what goes in. And it is really a very vast subject. And the way I personally thought it used to be. So a lot of learning.
Okay, good. Overall, what's your general, you have gone through almost 4 different subjects. Okay. Put together, how do you feel the the journey, the workload, and what do you think it's preparing you for the next 3 trimesters?
I would say it has been a roller coaster ride, Professor.
Mm. uh, roller coaster.
Yeah, it is.
Ah,
Yeah, up and down, going right and left, swinging left and right.
no, no,
So
happened.
all kind. Yeah.
See, when
So it has been yeah, it has been interesting, very busy. Yes, because you got to balance out your work and your
correct, correct.
study schedule. So that is one point. So prioritizing your activities, timing it out, ensuring your assignments are done, coordinating with the groups.
Yeah,
Yeah, it has been interesting because especially now since it is COVID times and we are interacting remotely
yeah,
and all
correct.
that adds to that dimension.
It's actually challenging as a leader.
Yes, indeed.
Hmm. Okay, so today what we will do, we will look at, yeah. See, I'm just going to list the lot of labor law as it is existing, or rather, I shouldn't say it is extincting. I'll tell you why. Because these are all this is not the only list, and this also all put together. In general, for a multi-product, multi-domain, multi-location organization, they will have to handle as much as some 30 to 40 different law. And many of them, you will see, had been enacted over so many years. Some of them are almost close to 100 years or even earlier. But then in this interim period, the life has not been stagnant. A lot of changes, a lot of dynamic changes taking place, and the cumulative dynamic changes taking place in the last few years is far higher than what it happened even in the 1 or 2 decades prior to that. So when we started, India was predominantly an agrarian economy, and only related few industries were there. Some basic industries which British wanted for their purpose were there. Otherwise, it was all predominantly agriculture and a good sprinkling of industrialization contributing to the total of the GDP of the country. Particularly in the last 30 years, the service sector has grown tremendously, not only in India but world over. And overall, if you see, service sector is accounting for more than 50% in the total GDP of the country. The industry sector also has expanded, both in terms of complexity and volume, and in terms of application of technology. But then the intention of the law in relation to employment, okay, labor law we call it, but basically in relation to employment. So had not kept pace with these changes, even though some amendments here and there, some changes were all made, a few enactments done in the last 10 years or 20 years, etc. It has not addressed the whole issue. And this matter was taken up about 5 years back by the present government. And they said it is very cumbersome for the industries, the businesses to operate, and particularly for the people involved, HR managers, functional managers, or even the unions, to understand, operate the nuances of so many acts in the context of changing dynamics. What are the changing dynamics? Intense competition, international competition, because of globalization, then lot of mobility of workforce across the region within a country and across many countries. And therefore, many of the acts had outlived their utility. And central government said that let's, instead of modifying, adjusting a few of the acts, let us look at the entire thing in a wholesome basis. And then they came with what is called labor code in 4 different sections. One is wages, second, social security and welfare, third, industrial relations, fourth, occupational safety, health, working conditions, etc. So all the existing law are being regrouped and subsumed under these 4 labor codes. So there are not going to be so many particular law to handle in future. Now, right now, since all these have been passed in the last 2 years by the parliament, the various central and state departments are working together to draw up the rules and procedures under each of this. So as and when it is ready, it's being rolled out. So going forward, we will be encountering with these 4 and not the some 20, 30, 40 old ones which is existing. So in the coming week, what I will do, I'll put up on LMS a concise compendium or a bird's eye view of each of the acts and what is going to be the way forward with this 4 labor code. And no need to too much worry about it, because from your very short-term objective of exams, these things are not going to form a part of the exams. Of course, when we talk about industrial relations or trade union, etc., we discussed in the last 1 or 2 classes, the relevant mention of the appropriate act becomes necessary, but beyond that, nothing else is expected. Now let us see, out of so many industries, IT industry, you can call it as a nascent industry. I mean, the real growth of IT industry has happened in the last 25 years, whereas other industries in other domains had existed hundreds of years. So now the question is, which are the labor laws which apply to Indian industry, IT industry, or nothing is applicable to IT industry because it is a different industry kind of. So many things are being discussed. But as of today, almost all the labor laws which are applicable to any other industry are also applicable to the IT industry, except perhaps since it is not a industry or manufacturing in the typical sense, it's all done in offices with some sophisticated equipments. Factories Act, then the Industrial Dispute Act, and a few other state labor law may not apply. But otherwise, every other labor law on the statute book of center and states are applicable to IT industries. But then each of the state government have been given powers to exempt any particular industry from the law made by central government, right, with respect to certain sections or the full law itself. Now, again, interestingly, originally when industrial development started, the concept of workman was needed to be defined, which was done actually as late as Indian Industries Act 1965. So that who is a workman and what is the obligation between workman versus the organization. And therefore, if something were to happen to that workman, what are the liabilities arising out of it and how far the management is responsible, etc. But that is the main purpose of that. Now, following up on the earlier one, IT industry, and now today every industry is technology oriented. Can an employer control employees' use of social media inside the workplace or outside the workplace? What do you think? Or is it happening in your organization? How are they controlling the use of social media?
Sir, we have an IT policies at our place.
Hmm.
So as per the policy, it is totally defined that certain sites which cannot be used, certain social medias which cannot be used by the employees, and we are making people follow that.
How do you ensure that?
Sir, once
Okay.
they enter in the office premises,
Hmm.
so these sites are automatically blocked. Even if they try to go for it, they cannot.
Okay. Right. So there's the electronic systems in place, just as earlier days there used to be a mobile jammer. You are having jammer which jams these apps, right? And
Yes, sir.
that is provided if it goes through the internet of the organization. If I'm having my own internet connectivity, how do you prevent it?
Sir, you still cannot breach
That's
it.
one thing which is
There is
uncontrollable.
first you log in into the main system of the company. From there, everything else is connected.
Correct. So that means you are going through a firewall.
Exactly.
Okay, fine. So why should they do it? What happens? Why organizations would interfere with the what do you call it? Individual? Is it an individual right?
But sir, firewall
Huh.
firewall thing will be used only if we are using Wi-Fi. If individual is using their personal mobiles or personal net, we cannot do anything about it.
So how do you block it then?
We are not able to do anything for that, sir.
Correct. But should we block or not? That's the
So
question.
this is a
Actually,
personal right. It should not be. It should not be.
Professor, in our organization, if you are using different network and company devices, for example, system and laptop, then also because the system is under admin access, so they can access our browsers, everything in our system. So even though we are not using company network, they have access to the contents that we do on our systems. That's why they can prevent it.
Okay. So now, why
you have real-time productivity tracking software as well, tracking every move and every click. So anything that you do apart from your regular job, I know it's easily tracked, and it raised red flags everywhere.
So strict policing.
Yeah, there is.
Because
yeah,
and also IP addresses.
Yeah. No, but then it's true. Large organizations can afford to do it, they're doing it. But a lot of small, medium organizations, they don't have mechanism even to do it. Right?
Right, sir. So we had a earlier organization, so where it was a core banking project. So they were not allowed to take their smartphones inside the ODC.
Correct.
They used to check that only allowed was this basic set where you can message and call. That's it.
Yeah. So that's why it's yeah. Go ahead.
All banking organizations work in the same fashion.
Yeah.
Irrespective even if you are using your system, until and unless you log in into the mainframe, you cannot access any, and your system will become dummy once you log in into their system.
Okay. So by and large, you can do first by device control, and second by systems control. Okay. Then third by behavioral control. So that is why it's happening, because a lot of people in their misplaced enthusiasm keep on communicating. Okay. Now think of the days when you didn't have this capability of devices. What were we doing? Were we not working? So here what has happened is, always it happens, availability generally improves access and use. And the use is misused. It becomes detrimental to that individual or to the organization. Therefore, it is within reasonable right for the employer to put a restriction on the use of social media in or out the workplace. Second thing is, what happens is, many people, as I said, have got the enthusiasm to keep on sharing, right, information. You could call it chatting also, starting from that, and with every other people. So inadvertently, lot of important commercial details and even certain high-level secretive information might get leaked out inadvertently. Therefore, it becomes necessary. So what they do is, most of the organizations, they stipulate it in the service agreement or by way of company's IT policy. And you cannot write it all these things in the employment letter. Therefore, they said that you will adhere to the company's information, IT policy, etc., etc. And therefore, that is separately framed and then displayed. So that is important, because any diversion is at the expense of productivity. Okay. And not all the people can control their productivity in terms of time. So that is why whatever is assigned, any job evaluation system usually assigns for the above average employee. So if it is beyond that, very good and excellent employees will have more time at their disposal. So that time should not be wasted for others. So that is the reason why this control of the use of social media and other things are coming in very much in picture. Okay. Now today, most of us are working from away from office. So how is this control being done? See, when you are in your premises, you can do many things. When we are
Professor, actually, yeah, for IT industries, the device from the laptop from where we work, there is a VPN connection through which we connect to the company's network, and that has a inbuilt firewall, so we cannot open any websites or anything which is not allowed by the company policies and all.
Correct.
So
that's why I said,
so all the
designated device and then device control and systems control is generally used. But then when you are away, you may not put in so much of effort as required, because difficult to monitor when you are away. So that's why there are snooping mechanisms which are coming in, which practically talk about, from the time you log in. When you say log in, we are expecting that every employee is sitting before a computer. There are many jobs, consumer-facing jobs in marketing, sales, supply chain, business development, where the computer or mobile phone need not be used. Okay, even in spite of COVID, still interactions do take place and do that. So that is why we need to have an appropriate policy defined, and then that policy should be accepted by the various employees as part of the service conditions. Again, coming to the new age. What is new age? New age is lot more of the ladies coming into occupation, far higher than it was so many years back. Then mobility of people from multiple regions and from multiple countries. And so when too many people move across, and the atmosphere in the organization is not very cohesive like before, but it is more diverse. So how do you handle this diversity and then a lot of women coming to employment? So obviously this compared to previous are throwing up newer issues in terms of processes, in terms of people handling. Yet we don't have a comprehensive specific legislation which addresses the discrimination or even harassment in workplace, except in relation to what we call sexual harassment, which has been defined, and there is a law in force for the last 5-6 years. Now, so the sexual harassment of women at workplace, etc., and simultaneously it had necessitated the amendment to criminal law because it is made a criminal offense. So what is interesting for us in this class to understand is there is a grievance redressal forum in each organization, which is mandatory. That means every organization where I think probably more than 10 or so female employees are employed, we need to have a grievance redressal mechanism system. And in the grievance redressal committees are there at the local section level, at the plant level, at the industry level. And people can take their grievances, and there's a mechanism drawn, and a lady employee, including somebody from HR, has also been made mandatory to serve in these committees, so that there will be fairness in handling the grievances. And this is very similar to what we discussed in the last previous classes, where the employee discipline we discussed about. We talked about grievance handling method as one of the things, and this is similar to that. Again, therefore, the concept of bad touch, good touch, what is unwelcome behavior, etc., all of them need to be defined. Because on the one hand, we are talking about people being free within inverted commas, right? Not conservative, not restrictive. And you have to balance it with excessive overtures, rather behavior by people of either sex. I'm not talking only about male from female, because there is a couple of years back, there's a film where female were taking the advance on the male. So it is very normal, natural behavior of people, but we are concerned so long as it affects the work atmosphere and the work output. So what are the emerging HR challenges which you are facing? Now, organizational challenges. What are the organizational challenges? International competition, globalization, costs going up, but we are not able to pass it on to customers. Unless our products and services are very distinctive and continuously distinctive, the customers will look at our products as good, equivalent to some other good products. Therefore, it all boils down to how do you manage the cost. So cost management becomes extremely important. Even though input cost might go up, how do you manage the product cost? Through appropriate process engineering. Then personal finance, yes, there's always a pressure because aspirations have gone up. And those people who have got 2 or 3 children, you know very well that investment has gone substantially high in primary and secondary education and collegiate education. And in addition to that, whatever items, gadgets were considered comforts or luxury have almost become necessity now. And then many of them do not last for many years. Therefore, replacement also starts coming in. So overall, there's a organizational pressure and personal pressure in finances. Stress increasing, more demanding, because more workforce coming in, and therefore existing people have to upskill, have to develop themselves, and organization also has to pitch in and how much they can help in developing the individuals. Then work-life balance, particularly when people are commuting long distances, the husband, wife, children, and many families, husband and wife both are working. So work-life balance is again becoming a very key issue in determining their work behavior in the workplace. Then globalization trends we have discussed. Demography structure is changing. Workforce from multiple regions, multiple countries. Mobility is much higher. Then managing knowledge workers. Right. I'm not talking about half knowledge workers. I'm talking about knowledge workers, means predominantly people will have to use their cognitive power to get things done or to do things. So they are more inquisitive, they are more questioning. They don't accept instructions as it was being given like in earlier days. Today people are asking why, and why me? Why not others? Like that. Then impact of technology, in work organizational process, newer and newer gadgets, newer technologies like AI, ML, IoT coming in is changing the complete perception of the work and the processes, and therefore the man-machine interaction is again changing, which is adding to more work, more stress. On the one hand, there is ease and more objectivity. On the other hand, it is leading to more and more of coping with higher levels of technology, needing much prompter response from the working people. Okay, any comments up to this? Now, today, most of the organizations are international. It is not as if we have to have offices everywhere, but our operations are there everywhere. Either buying organizations or our selling products and services, we are there. Therefore, it becomes necessary for organizations to have their employees in multiple countries. So for our discussion today, the base country from which we have started the operation, we will call it as home country. And the other countries where the operations are going to take place are being directed from this country, we will call it as host country. Clear? Home country and host country. So the moment we need to handle people as part of the employment process in across the borders, then we enter into the arena of international human resource management. The three key factors which impact substantially are cultural factors, economic systems, legal industrial relation factors in each of the countries. What is culture? Come on, what is culture? Have you finished all the classes in OT or still something remaining?
So no, finished. Everything is finished.
Finished. Okay, good. So by now you should be able to answer many such questions. So what is culture?
Culture is the way of life.
Very good. Excellent.
Particular group.
So it is a collective, what you said, it's a collective way of work of a certain community or organization, of which individual is a part, and individual subsumes their individual interest to the organizational or societal way of behavior. So that is the key implication of cultural factors. So every country has got its own economic systems. And because of different political systems, the legal systems are different. And every country has got a right to regulate its industrial relations based on the type of industries and the climate in that particular organization. So for people like us who are involved in international human resource management, we should definitely take into account these three factors. But if I'm going to operate in 5 countries, I have to deal with 5 sets of these factors independently and in combination. So in which case, we'll have to have people working for us. So that is a challenge. So that is the why many times what happens is, what is convenient? What is convenient is to send the home country people to wherever the operation takes place, either on a permanent basis, regular basis or interim basis. So whenever somebody is posted outside the home country, we call him as an expatriate, his or her. Now these expatriate assignments are done taking into account the best employee who has been performing very well to be chosen and sent to the other countries, right? Am I right? That's how it is chosen. How do you choose for foreign posting? What do you call? That's a colloquial word. How do they do in your organization?
They send to on-site.
Yeah.
On-site.
No,
Yeah,
on-site is
on-site.
fine. That's a term. How do you decide whom to send?
Based on the experience, capability, and the performance.
Who know the language?
Better
Okay.
communication and understanding skills of the project.
Yeah,
Okay.
client facing and
Who are a
convince.
little bit of people person.
Yes. So we are primarily looking at the knowledge and skill factors. And when you talk about experience, you are talking about experience in that particular function, in that particular domain, right? Correct?
Yes, and as well, whoever done that before, like whoever traveled on site and done the project successfully.
Correct. How many people will get that, right? So if every organization, yes, it's good, is looking for people who already have experience, we'll come to that later. But then more than that, when in staffing global organizations, many times these expatriate assignments fail. Have you seen that? In your organizations, have every expatriate assignment, has it succeeded?
In some cases, it goes wrong.
Some or many? Depends.
Not many.
Okay.
Maybe we can take 30%.
Yeah. So I'll come to that 30% or 20% a little later. There's an implication for that. Okay. Now, why it fails generally is because the individual personality is very, very important. Because it is something which the person carries, right? You can't remove like a shirt and put somewhere and go, wear a different personality. So the personality goes along with the individual. Now it matters. Now the personal intention of the individual matters. Why the person wants to go abroad? What for? What is the single most motivator factor for foreign assignment?
Financial gain.
So we assume that we will be able to save more, right? By being posted outside.
Yes,
So
Professor.
there could be other intentions for people to go out and even learn newer things, interact with people, etc. But that's why all of you rightly said, the first motivator is financial. Then why it fails? Because of family pressures. No, not all the cases, the individual will travel with the family and go settle from day one. It takes time, depending on the tenure of the particular assignment. So in the interim period, having to manage 2 establishments becomes quite difficult. Sometimes if elderly people are there, you'll have to manage 3 establishments. So immediate family, the elders, and the self. Now, even when, let's say, whether you take the spouse along, that's why I use the word spouse, not just wife. Okay. The inability of the spouse to adjust, because having lived under same roof, right? Even if you have been traveling 20 days or whatever, but still technically living under the same roof. Now today, for protracted periods to live apart, right? It becomes difficult for each other to adjust for that different set of living. And many times we think easy. Many of you have gone abroad will know that it is far more difficult to manage in foreign locations than known local locations. Inability to cope with overseas responsibilities. I'm not talking about just living. The job responsibility functionally may be same, but the way it is operated in different countries will be different. And most importantly, people lack cultural skill. We'll discuss in a minute what is cultural skill. Why do you call it culture? Yes, we have defined correctly. What is cultural skill? So when we staff for international organizations, the general tendency normally is to take home country nationals as the top ranking employees and post them in all global operations as much as possible. That we call it as ethnocentric staffing. The second would be home country workers sent to top positions in central offices, headquarters, key locations, and overseas local workers are taken, trained. Geocentric staffing means whoever the best person, irrespective of which country, region, where, what they come from, is chosen. So that means the recruitment, selection, deployment, development of people will differ based on these policies. Similarly, the expatriation methods, compensation to be given, then repatriation, because that's why we use the word expatriation. The person is to come back. So we call it repatriation. Now, succession planning. Okay, we take somebody who is very good, like many of you suggested, based on experience, etc. We send them. Who is going to man that position? Where will we find that person? Is it by internally? Or is it by looking at external, or a combination? How long will it take? Because there is what is known as, just all of you in accounting have learned what is called operating cycle. Did you hear the word operating cycle? Yes or no? You didn't? Come on, if you haven't, then we will discuss. If you have, then we'll discuss on that. What is operating cycle? I'm surprised. None of the 36 people have heard of this operating cycle.
We heard, sir.
What is it?
The number of days required to do business.
Number of days to business. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe some companies follow fiscal year or financial or something.
Okay. Yeah, that's Wilson, is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It starts with a basic simple principle. I start with money and I buy raw materials, consumables, then convert it into work in process, that gets converted into finished goods. Then finished goods will be taken and then distributed, then sold, money collected back, and the cash comes in. And this is the operating cycle, simple. Okay. So in the process, the goods may still be in condition which is not directly saleable, that is work in process and semi-finished goods, etc. Then when we sell, we may not realize the money immediately. Some portion will get later, so we call it sundry debtors. So all this put together forms the operating cycle. The shorter the operating cycle, the better, because you are rotating the money so many times. So that is the fundamental principle you should have understood in accounting and finance. So the best financial management of an organization will be to look at the overall operating cycle and also reduce the components of operating cycle in terms of number of days. Same way here, we will talk here about the role fulfillment cycle. Because whatever the role I have, right, I'll have to find somebody to position in the role, make sure that the person keeps operating, right? Leave alone the efficiency, performance management will come later, right? At least somebody to man the role, right? And then make sure that operation goes on. And once for some reason that person is displaced, either by sending him as an expat or a transfer to another department, that position becomes vacant. I would again get to the process of getting somebody and fulfilling. So the time taken for this role fulfillment, right, or vacancy fulfillment in the colloquially what we call, and that is very, very important. But what happens if that cycle is long? 1 or 2 case studies also we discussed in the class earlier. What happens if the cycle is too long? Tell me, what is the effect?
The process of
Costly increase.
Yeah.
delay.
Yeah, okay, but what is the effect? What is the effect on the organization and the outcome? Because in the first place, we wanted that role, isn't it? Correct?
Yes, sir.
Therefore, if the role is not there, manned, then that means we are abandoning that function, or somebody else has to pitch in to share the load. And so whoever is pitching in to share the load will have to overwork. So both the functions might suffer. So technically, the more attrition, the longer time you take for this role fulfillment time, then the organization outcome suffers. And think of it, extend it in expected situation. You post somebody for various reasons which we discussed. Okay. The person comes back, the assignment fails. So what is the damage done? It's very, very difficult to fulfill those positions and continue the operation. Sometimes you will lose projects, right? It must, I don't know, many of you in organizations, sometimes it have happened or you must have seen happening in other organizations. Therefore, it is important to properly orient and train employees on international assignment. It is not like, sending a letter congratulating that you have been selected, you'll be posted and you report next week and all that. And that's not orienting and training. They'll say, come down, we'll have a chat for 1 day. We'll tell you what to do, what not to do. So more of what not to do will be told. What is important here is the initial training and periodic orientation is needed on the impact of the country cultural differences and the way the businesses are conducted. The country's political, economic, business systems, cultural factor, which are relevant to customers, suppliers, distribution systems, and sometimes even a little bit of knowledge of local language, all becomes important. So if these ones are all properly inducted and oriented, not just when somebody is suddenly selected, but whoever is in the eye view, that who are likely to be posted. So if regularly they are taken up, then there are far greater success of this expatriate international operations. And in the process, we will also look at these factors, the personality factors, intentions, possibly any difficulty in adjustment they might have, as stated by them, of course. So all of them can also be identified. And therefore, even while selecting, if I know that mine is an international organization, I'm going to bid for jobs across the world, or whatever products and services we make are going to be marketed in multiple countries. So I know very well that people who are being taken, a good majority of them, should definitely have technical skills, leadership skills, knowledge specific to operations, even managerial competence, all of them. Plus, if there had already been some work experience internationally, which is relevant, very important. And the person is extroverted, not loud talking or laughing or something, but the person who is outgoing, who is willing to take the first step out and greet other people and talk to them instead of waiting for others to talk to him or her. Then stress tolerance, how much of stress the person can take, because stress is related to uncertainty. Uncertainty related to unknown surroundings. So when you go abroad, surroundings are even more hostile, unknown than the domestic country. Then how much the person is willing to adapt and adopt to unfamiliar situations. Then aptitude to pick up quickly language skills. Then cultural experiences, ability to adjust to different cultures, right? Now, most important also, sensing the environment. That means the small little antenna inside our brain, how it can quickly pick up signals on outside and sense what is likely to happen, what is not likely to happen. Am I going to react only when something has happened and hit my face? These are all important qualities which we should look for when you build the inventory of skills, when you look for talents who can work across the nations. Now, there are obviously many costs and damages. If you don't have the right international employees, right, we discussed, the position will be abandoned. The job may not be done. Sometimes job is half done, improperly done. Recoup is even more difficult. And also the cost associated with the recruitment and also relocation of the person again. Relocation of self, relocation of family. Then possible loss that the employee might not return to this company. He may return and say something XYZ and move away from somewhere. So the motivation of the host country staff, how much they are respecting and receptive to the ethnocentric or polycentric staff posted. And by improper behavior of such international employees will damage host country relationship and channel partner relationship also. And because of that, we will miss a lot of opportunities to further develop the market. So what we need to do is that under the current circumstances, draw up the strategic HRM needs, identify key critical lifeline positions in multiple locations, and then create a global workforce where when to have expats, when to have locals, and how to create people who are mobile across. We'll call them as glopats. It is not confined to any one country or one project, but the person can move around. So what is needed to be done is to have a proper global database with inventory of skills and behavior. And also, we need to have panels of reputed international job hire firms, because this process cannot be done internally by just within any one company. And also, we need to develop by good practices, right, internally, to be known and called as the best company to join or the best employer. Okay, just give me a minute. I will change the internet connection and come. Sorry for the mini break. Yeah. Now, we will move away from IHR to another important area. What is the difference between human resource management in startup, tiny and small businesses versus medium and large businesses? What do you think are the differences?
The complexity increases.
Yes. Yes, okay. Because of the size, complexities are different, and the priorities in terms of people function also different. There are a lot of informality, and most likely the owner, manager. So the nature of entrepreneur. In addition to that, lack of specialized HR expertise, obviously we can't afford in small companies. Therefore, what happens is the workplace litigation cannot be addressed properly. There will be a difference of opinion that could lead to some litigation. And if that happens, that particular small industry collapses. And some of this, for example, many of you who are in some mid or senior positions might like to go and join a smaller medium organization as general managers and CEOs, because moving from functional position to general management position to man up is the aspiration of most people. So in that case, when we go and position ourselves as overall managers of different functions, not just only one vertical under that one function. So we may even inadvertently cut corners by not managing proper compensation or labor law following, etc. And therefore, there can be a lot of duplication and paperwork also. And this is, how do we solve this if this is the cases in small scale industries? But there are advantages in small scale because familiarity, flexibility, informality, so all of them give that extra edge to be competitive. Agility is better, faster. So here, the familiarity, when you talk about, and flexibility, it is in terms of how the owner-managers relationship between and the other key managers, right, have come together in terms of personal relationship as well as the culture of flexibility in operation. Now, obviously in any small industry, you won't have so many functions and so many functional managers. Generally, one functional manager will handle more than one designated manager, might handle more than one or two functions. Now, again, the most difficult thing is going to be when wrapping up, when the organization scale increases from tiny to mini, mini to small, small to medium, because you will have to handle market issues, finance issues, and sudden need of large people issues. And this is where the question comes in, where do you want to have your own HR or you want to have hired HR services? If so, which services to hire, which portion of HR services to hire, and are such good outsourcing services available at all, dependable? Now, HR functions and processes, is it different for different sizes? What do you think?
Not different, sir.
It is same. Yeah. So anybody who manages working in a smaller organization can also manage in bigger organizations if he is posted?
No, Professor, it will be not so easy task to manage.
Just the experience matters, sir.
Right. Now, I've asked the question deliberately. The functions will not differ, but the processes will differ. Because fundamentals can never change. Recruitment, say, let's start with strategic planning, manpower planning, role definitions, job description, recruitment, selection, induction, onboarding, performance management, training and development, talent management, right? Then exit management. All of them are same. Fundamentals won't change. But process will have to change depending on the sizes and depending on the growth stage. In fact, you are going to present a little later the Atok case. So part of it, is contained. The answer is contained of this also. So now we'll move to today. If we want to be progressive, not because we want to show we are progressive, but we want to progress, HR analytics becomes important. So when you say analytics, analysis is different. Analytics is statistical techniques, regression, cluster, factor, etc., and multiple sources of data, right? Multiple types of data. About people only I'm talking about here, because we are only discussing in this slide HR analytics, not data analytics, not business analytics. So this analytics, like any analytics, should work as a decision support system. But after all these tools and techniques are not going to totally replace human beings. Ultimately, whether it is strategic decisions or tactical decisions, operative decisions have to be taken by the individuals manning various positions. But this analytics helps substantially to get more and more of business insight into whatever the data will tell the story. Generally, data will not tell you false story unless the person handling data manipulates and gives a different picture. So we can predict risk of turnover by function, location, position, which hires are likely to be high performers, which hires are the higher risk of leaving prematurely, even when probably. So the artificial intelligence, machine learning, right? All these mechanisms have come here to stay. Just as once upon a time, we thought banking means people. Now banking means more of technology and ATMs, etc. Now, similarly, it's going to be slowly replaced, right, with this. But then can HR bots replace humans completely? The answer is no. Because HR bots or any such gadgets are actually enablers. Therefore, don't resist. Try to include and embrace. Learn to coexist and use it as intelligent as possible. Why do we have to do it? That's the question. Fine. The prescription is particularly in matters where subjectivity comes in. Let me assume that my organization is 4,000 people and my average attrition rate is 25%. That means every year, 1,000 people I will have to find. Calculation is right? Now in 4 years, the organization has been turned over once. So how do we get so many people? And to get one position, you can't just get one application directly fit in. So the process of pooling the applicants, putting together, again is done by whom? Humans. Now humans, in the morning we are brisk, in our mindset we will do something. Afternoon, evening we will behave differently. So there is a fatigue of handling. Somebody says, I am given 250 tickets to handle in a day or month or whatever, but depending on the size of the ticket. Or they will say that I have to handle so many number of applications, etc. So it's going to be difficult. Subjectivity will come in addition to fatigue factor. Therefore, these various technologies which use, including face reading, text mining, right, and also sorting out based on parameters prescribed, they will substantially help for us to analyze, predict, even diagnose, and many issues. So going forward, we must, every organization now recognized that people are a source of competitive advantage, because everything else can be bought over and managed easily, and people is difficult to procure and even more difficult to manage, so that consistently the outcome is seen and in a very objective way. Therefore, it is important for us to have the right organizational commitment and culture for the employees concerned. For that sake, it is necessary to be individual to be continuously learning, and the organization should also be a continuously learning organization. So again, legal, ethical issues are becoming even more important. You can't escape now. So balancing legal, ethical concerns, and also instead of saying that do what I say, you ask people to say what they want, but then you take a decision as to what should be done. So, but in the process, creativity, innovation, improve and institutionalize as part of employee handling. So as we proceed more and more into 2021 to 2030 or even beyond, a lot of analytical tools and technology are more accessible now. Even for small, medium companies can afford. They can buy off the shelf, integrate, use cloud-based HR systems, SaaS methodology of subscription. But then all that is fine, but you need people to do that. So therefore, in future, the functional managers who have to do people management and the HR managers who will have to assist, advise the other functions on people management, all of them will have to be a kind of adept in embracing and adjusting to the new technologies. So when you move forward, if you want to be an effective leader, okay, you have to have certain qualities. So how to be an effective leader, how to function effectively, all these things we will discuss after a little break. And during this break, right, we'll take 5 minutes break, and each one of the groups, you think between yourselves, because once we come up after 5 minutes, I'm going to ask you for each group who is a group coordinator, and then I will note down the attendance today for each group, the name of the group coordinator, because some small work has to be done by the group coordinator today. And after that, in different order, we will call various groups one by one. Then you will present. And the presentation should not be more than 6 or 7 minutes. No need to describe the case. Straight away go to the questions, and then we will take up the answering that questions. And while answering the questions also, I'll see what are the key things which we would expect as an answer to the question. And no need to elaborately answer every question, because most of you have written and submitted. And I think about 20% of the people are yet to submit, or they are not there in the course or something. I don't know what happened. So the rest of them have all submitted. Now the first assignment have been seen by me, and the second assignment based on the submissions others, I will look at it. So in the next couple of days, together I will upload the marks for both the assignments on a relative grading basis. Okay, because absolute grading, some people may not get marks. So on a relative grading basis, I'll make sure that at even the, unless very bad performing, the others are given some reasonable marks, and that accordingly we will do that. So we'll come back. Now it is 14:35. So we'll be back by 14:45 for case presentation. So what do I need? I would request you to confirm your group coordinator and presenter. And as soon as we start, each group will call, give you the names of attendants and the group coordinator. Then you can start presenting.
Professor, one person will present or the entire?
Up to you. Because the questions, there are 4 questions.
Correct.
So 4 people can present or 1 person can present. That's why I said you decide, group coordinator, how you want to do it. Whatever way you have interacted, so absolutely no problem.
Okay. Okay.
No PPTs, only question to answer in a discussion mode.
Okay.
Yeah. Professor, shall we type in the group coordinator's name now, or once we come back, we will?
Once you come back, I'll take group by group. Let's say if I call group number 4, we'll see who are all present. And then at that time, you tell me who is the group coordinator. I'll note it down. Then presentation starts, go to the next group. Like that, we will complete. Okay. Then after all the presentations are complete, I will give a roundup of the understanding of the case. Then remaining a few more slides we will handle for the day and then close. So that will be agenda for rest of the time. So I'll pause the recording for another 10 minutes, come back at 14:45. Sorry, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Right. Now, when it comes to the performance management system, we will look at this way that performance has first to be defined. What is performance? Performance is something which needed to be done. Therefore, we need to know what the role holder is supposed to do, and starting with the job description. But then that is broad enough. Therefore, we need to come to goals. And the goals have to be transformed into SMART objectives, because that will be the guiding line on a day-to-day basis. But that again involves multiple items to be performed by each of the employees. And because a lot of transactions are involved in the actual job being done, and many outcomes are to be achieved. So putting together, what we will look at is the key result area has to be identified, because normal performance anybody has to do. Now, when you evaluate, we are going to evaluate with the basic understanding that whatever required is being done, then how well it is being done, in which critical areas, how much it is being done. Therefore, we move to KRA, and KRA should give rise to KPI, key performance indicators. So once you have key performance indicator, then we will be able to assess. This is where competency-based system comes into the picture, which is a very valid system, which talks about the identification of the key performance indicators. And that key performance indicators cannot just be a number, which the rating can be arbitrary, which need to have a descriptor. So if I'm going to have a particular sentence, let's say meeting the target. Now I need to say that meeting the target obviously has to be done. We'll say that meeting the target region wise, quarter wise. If I say that, it becomes very specific, right? It can be, it will translate it to a SMART objective. So once we have that, then we'll have to define, we did in that particular region last year in that quarter so much, and this quarter how much to be done to be rated as good, bad, or ugly. So you need to give a performance measure, a standard against which it can be measured. How do you arrive at a standard? That can be based on past performance, market situation, so many things. But at least one standard has to be arrived at, and against the standard we will say this has to be achieved. But again, you know that the achievement cannot be continuous month after month, and therefore what we do is, if the achievement of quarterly targets or if the achievement of monthly targets, we will say, if it is all the time, we will take it as excellent. Most of the time, we will take it as very good, right? Reasonable number of times, we'll say okay. Sometimes with the help of supervisor and not being performed at all. So if you can define this in terms of crisp 1 or 2 sentences, so this will help the appraisers to appraise, because they can say, okay, has it been consistent? Has it been on and off? Right? How many times? So you will have some kind of benchmarking based on which you can do the rating. In this particular case, you seem to have an appraisee, an appraiser, right? Maybe a recommendation authority, and then finally the committee. What seems to be happening when you look at it, we can inference, because the PAC seems to be, everybody thinks it's an all-power committee. In every organization, there is a PAC. And what is the job of the PAC? Because large verticals, between verticals, there may not be uniformity, because the way people rate, if, like what I said, the definition is not there, it is left to the interpretation of the meaning of that particular KPI for the appraiser to appraise. Therefore, you may see that some departments, it is very tight, some departments is very liberal, everybody is promoted, everybody is recommended for increment. Therefore, normalization has to be done. The ideal job of PAC is actually to perform this normalization across the organization, taking into account the financial implication, paying capacity, and also the processes adopted. So when it comes to that, obviously, in this case, it seems to be, because one reinforcing negatively other, everything is pushed up to the PAC. So obviously, PAC has become the villain. And therefore, they can't accept, they're remitting it back. And this is the real issue in this particular case. So everything starts with determining performance, defining performance, establishing standards, and rating methodology, how to compare with the standard. And this has to be very clearly laid out. And if that is done, the performance management system will work, because appraisal is a starting point to do many things. Based on the appraisal, you can give increment, you can promote as subject to interviews, other things, or you can pick up the gaps in what is needed to be done, what has been done, therefore what is the gap, and if the gap is to be fulfilled, should it be done by knowledge training or skill-based training or by attitude training, so how it should be done, and then you can decide progressively a calendar as to how to take up for this. Training is actually a shorter term version of taking employees development. Development is a longer term version, looking at the strategic human resource program of the organization and identifying potential talent and taking them through. So this has to be done in tandem in an integration fashion. So if that is done only, we can say the organization has got a effective working performance management system, right? Understood? It's clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, right. Now, when we move further, we should look at effective leadership. What is effective leadership? Each one of us is a leader. So we should envision, we should have enthusiasm, we should be earnest, and we should be empathetic. That means putting ourselves in the shoes of others and before criticizing anything. Now, a leader should provide inspiration, vision, then we should empower the people working below us to achieve this vision. If that is not done, we'll be doing part of that lower level job and we can never move up. If we don't move up, people below cannot move up. Therefore, we need to position ourselves as a transformational leader and not transactional based leader. Because transactions have to be done. But if you concentrate only on transactions, what to do and how it is done or not, that's not enough. Because the process has to go on to keep improving. To that, we need to be a lifelong learner in terms of skill, attitude, etc. But even now, I am part of 2 online programs from foreign university. I keep learning because there are certain areas where I think going forward, as we said, in terms of analytics, in terms of artificial intelligence, application into marketing and HR areas is going to be a very, very important area. So to get more and more into the current, what is happening. So I myself have logged myself as a student. So in a way, I'm like you. I'm also a student, but elsewhere. So it is important that the day you stop learning, right, you think you're going to be dead. It doesn't have to be a formal joining a program. Learning can be any ways. But in order to learn, right, generally it is suggested there are 4 steps in learning. How many of you have heard about this 4 steps in learning or have gone through it or read it anywhere? Anybody? Yes or no? Sounds familiar or
No,
you're seeing it the first time?
Sounds familiar, sir, but don't recall.
Okay. All right. So instead of going through this, I will leave it for you to read, but I will only tell you. Let's say I don't want to depend on public transport on somebody else, right? Now the best is, let me be a master of myself. Let me ride a 2-wheeler or let me ride a 4-wheeler, right? So what am I doing? So I know that I am unskilled with respect to riding a two-wheeler or four-wheeler. I am not conscious of it yet. So that's the first stage. In order to learn, I must become conscious of my incompetence. That is the unskilled level I must accept. If I don't know, then I will not take the first step of even trying to find out what should I learn, why should I learn, and is it possible to learn. So that's the first step in doing. The next step is, after having known that yes, I must ride a two-wheeler and four-wheeler, I go across and find a driving school and then tell them that I want to learn. Oh, what is the big deal? It's not rocket science. Hundreds of people are doing. But then when I go and sit in the car, I'm very confused. I'm searching for gear, I'm searching for various things. Even after 3 days, 4 days, we are looking down into near our legs. We are not even looking at the windows, knocking at the front in the road. The driver who is with us, who is trying to teach, right? He is saying, no, don't look at, they don't panic like that, because he's also having another auxiliary wheel with him so that he doesn't want to get killed. So he's helping us to learn. At that point itself, many people can give up, right? You can come, or you must get conscious that yes, I'm getting a feel of it, or I'll make sure I get a feel of it, then I will go through further. Then if you go through further, so at that set, what am I doing? I'm conscious that I'm unskilled. I'm on the path of learning. I want to be skilled. Then the third stage, when I go, then now I don't have to worry. I don't have to have the learner driver. I got a license. I'm driving forward. I don't have to constantly peeping through the speedometer and various dashboard and also front. I can keep talking, chatting here, even though it's not advisable. So I'm just doing it. A stage comes where I know it like my second nature. It has become a habit. So at that stage, I just can open, get in, click, and then keep moving around. So it has become a habit. I am unconsciously skilled. So this is the level we need to reach in learning. But in the learning process, there are impediments, because every stage you can fall back, right? And the slide down will be much faster coming back to the previous stage and not moving up. And this is very, very important in terms of effective learning process. This, you can see it, different books slightly differently portray. This is how I have understood as Paul. You can read it through and then understand what I'm talking about. So when you prepare for your future career, I'm not scaring you, but as of today, your future of your career is at risk. Your education, current skill set, work experience are rapidly becoming redundant. Your current knowledge, skills will become having a very, very limited shelf life. So if you want to move forward, you need to identify what skills, what knowledge, what attitudes you need to develop over the next 3 years and 5 years, and then see where you are, and then use that ladder model and see how you want to equip yourself. The other important thing here is, behaviorally, personality wise, I can be a very good individual contributor, or I can be better as an integral part of a team, where together in the team I can add value. So you have to decide what kind of person you are. Therefore, you will have to position yourself going forward, how I'm going to be contributing. If I think I'm good as an individual contributor, probably you can go far up in your functional level, in your vertical level, faster and faster by equipping yourself and making yourself much more skilled with the right atmosphere to have the managerial positions in the functional area. If you think you are more an integrative person and you can contribute in a team, then you should think of developing general management skills. Functional skills are important, but multifunctional skills are important there. One functional skill is not enough if you want to go a manager across multiple skills. So that you'll have to decide and act suitably. So best individual contributor, manager of best individual contributors, then manager of managers. That's how your career progression has to go. Because remember, don't depend on the company. Jobs are owned by the company, but you own your career. Don't expect career planning to be done by company. It cannot, because their objective is different. They are business organization. And think that whenever you say, what are you doing? I'm working for someone. You are not working for anybody. You are working at that place for yourself. Make that change as an individual. Your driving force for a career change, path change, even during your EMBA, further going forward, must come within you. Don't look in a constrained fashion, your organization say, what do I do after EMBA? No. Think what, as an individual, what I want to do in EMBA, how far EMBA is going to help, what else I need to equip myself. By doing it, where will I be in the organization, or where should I be in elsewhere? If you start looking at it, then your expansion will be far, far better. You'll be very, very more effective. Therefore, excellence is not a destination. It's a lifelong continuous path. If I am jumping 6 feet in high jump, very good. Because last year I might have jumped only 5'8". Now then my next target is how soon can I cross 6.2? Then how soon 6.4? But when you look around, there'll be other people already crossing 6.6, 6.8. No, that shouldn't deter me, because I can do incrementally. The faster I am doing incrementally, I may catch up with other people someday. So it's a long continuous path. In fact, realizing it, a couple of friends and myself, we are developing a website called choiceexcellence.net. It is an experimental stage. You can still Google around and find it out. And FB in my name also, the same one is there. In the next 1 month, it's going to be launched in a full-fledged fashion. So I'll send information to you. You can have more access to that and participate and also give your suggestions. Now I've given the list of short answer questions and long answer questions, and 95% plus all the answers you can find from my PPTs themselves. And in the book Destler, go through, look at the index or glossary page, keep topics relevant to this, go back and refer to the relevant pages. You'll be able to supplement, because I'm not expecting you to read the hundreds and hundreds of pages of all the books, which may or may not be possible. Do it excellent, otherwise doesn't matter. Supplement as much as possible. Then continue to enjoy learning and do well in your exam and your life. Keep in touch, I have given. So my request is, you can send a mail to me, some critical issues which you are facing in your organization, which can keep discussing about it. And in addition to that, if any suggestion you have, you can give for, further going forward. Yes.
Sir, which book to refer?
Hello, Professor.
So how did you enjoy the journey in Trimester 1 and particularly in HRM? Has it been a good learning process?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Professor.
Right. So if anything is pending, you can always write to me if any clarification and confusion. So
Professor, I was asking which book to refer, and is there an online copy available?
Already the book is there, Destler, Gary Destler. Whatever the, I think the digital copy is already in the LMS, if I remember right.
Yes, Professor.
Yes, Professor.
Yeah, so that's good enough. I mean, I don't think you'll have time to read for every subject some 500, 600 page book. It's not going to be practical. So that's why I said best way to learn a book is go through the book and then see the index or glossary, and you will see some topic, and then the topic page number will be there or page numbers will be there. Come back to that page, read those things. Okay, so my PPTs, my whatever we are discussing across. So as far as I am concerned, I'm quite happy that we have gone through quite smoothly in the process. My only small, I can't say regret, is that I would have expected much more participation from working people like you in the class. Because the more they participate, even I also learn, right, to know current practices, whatever it is. But that doesn't prohibit me from asking you to send a mail to me. If any interesting practices you observe in your organization, any of the HR areas, please communicate and we can be in touch. That's all for today. God bless. Thank you.
Also,
Unless you
Professor,
have
a small query.
Professor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with regards to the exams, so just a small query, like what can we like expect there?
Short answer questions I have given. Long answer questions I have given.
Sure. Thanks, Professor.
So the short answer questions means we don't expect you to write more than 6 or 7 sentences. Okay, which should be basic point. When I say what is the meaning of strategic HRM, you should very clearly say it is strategic HRM is an offshoot or is a fallout from the company's strategic management system, and strategic HRM, right, addresses the long-term needs of the manpower of the organization, right, and the people being a strategic competitive advantage. So this is what is clear, right? No need to write some huge pages and reproduce everything. So that is for the short answer questions. When it comes to the long answer question, obviously, right, now when I say selection is indeed elimination process, evaluate critically the steps. Now you can't simply say, yes, I agree. Selection is an elimination process. So then we do the test, we interview and selection. If you write that, it is not even worth 3 marks. You'll have to really go through saying that why selection is an elimination process, right? Why do we say that? Because even when the shortlisted and tested candidates are presented, we are going to take only certain number of people required for the current requirement, and we are going to leave out the rest of the people. So what we are trying to do, sometimes it is difficult to select. Therefore, we start eliminating and saying that out of the remaining, the best ones will be available for future consideration. So that is why you should say it is an elimination process. And then we should also say the steps involved, starting from recruitment onwards to selection. In the selection, preferably the selection mistakes like type 1 and type 2 that you are likely to make, like not able to select good candidate because your system is faulty, you are going to miss an opportunity, get irrelevant, or you may select your system of even initial screening and subsequent process are not good enough. Therefore, you end up in selecting people who are not good enough. That means that the input components are not good, right? Whatever be the process, the outcome will not be good. Therefore, the selection process should take care of these issues at every stage, starting from the selection test to the interviews and multiple forms of interviews. Then how do you take them through so that you get the best of the lot? So that's how it should be done. So that's the way for each of the questions. Wherever diagrams are there, right, it's always preferable to give that schematic diagram along with the for the long answer questions. So that will consolidate your understanding. So based on the extent it is written and supplemented by examples from real life or the examples we've discussed in classes, and the schematic will go toward the highest marks. Otherwise, proportionality will be less. So that is as for the long answer questions. There will be a case study which will have 2 or 3 questions. Again, go through the case first, Don't get panicky. Don't look at the questions. Then second, slow reading. Mark the key words or key sentences. Then go and see the question and appropriately pick up, put it in your own words. Don't copy sentences from case and write, because the very purpose of the questions is to know that whatever you have studied in the class we have learned, we are able to apply to that case situation with respect to the specific question asked. Okay. So that's it for now. So I'm sure you will do well. So there's nothing to worry. Don't lose sleep over it.
Most of the questions
Thank you, Professor.
come from this only.
Yeah, I will give you a question. This is only indicative. I will put up on the LMS a broader list of questions, right? It doesn't mean I'm going to give you expected questions. Because how the system works is, from this question bank, right? Certain number of questions will be picked, and then the question paper will be formed, right? When the question paper is being written. Okay.
Okay.
So that is how it is. But what is important here is the way the questions are formed. That is more important. That will not change. Like if I have given 4, let's say 5 out of this, they will make 3 question papers. For question paper 1, they may take the item 1 and 4. Question paper 2, they may pick up 2. Question paper 3, they may pick up 4. From some other list, they may pick up. So that's how 3 question papers are done, out of which any question paper may be given on that day. The second paper will be used for the makeup exam in the subsequent week, and the 4th one may be used for supplementary later. I mean the 3rd question paper. So that's how the process is being done here. Clear?
Okay, Professor.
Okay.
Professor Abhinandya, the presentation module 8 and is not uploaded. That is.
It will be uploaded. Don't worry.
Okay, and even this.
Yeah, everything, including this, and also the write-up on the various law, which is there, a brief about it, and what is the new labor code about it. All of them will be uploaded. Nothing to worry.
Thank you, Professor.
Everything. And now that we have done today, now before I close, there's a small task I set for the group coordinators. Now, as soon as the class is over, send WhatsApp to me, the group coordinators for each group, saying that the name of people, your group name, the names of people who did not cooperate or participate, and then out of the presentation of so many groups, which presentation of some other group other than yours, your group has liked best. So if you are from group 5, and if you think group 8 has presented so very well compared to everybody else, say best presentation group 8, then mention our group is 5 and the following people did not participate or cooperate. This much you help me, send a WhatsApp. That's all what I need from you. Okay? Kindly do it within the next 1 hour. Agreed?
Agree, Professor.
Yes, Professor.
Okay. Very good. Excellent. Thank you.
Yes,
thank you. Goodbye. Good luck. All the best. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Right.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah.